I never thought a whistle could change everything, but there I was, standing in the dusty parking lot of Riverside Baptist Church on a sweltering June morning, wearing my new cream linen suit that my mother had insisted I buy for Cousin Rachel's wedding, and I heard it, sharp, clear, appreciative, the kind of whistle that cuts through the humid Oklahoma air and makes your heart stop for just a second. When I turned around, there he was, Jake Morrison, all 6 feet of sun-bronzed muscle and calloused hands, leaning against a rusted pickup truck with a smile that could melt steel. I'd known Jake my whole life, the way you know everyone in a town of 3,000 people. He was the Morrison kid, 3 years older than me, who dropped out of college after 1 semester to work his family's farm when his father got sick. I was Daniel Pritchard, the preacher's son who was supposed to be away at seminary school, not home for the summer, definitely not standing here feeling my face flush hot under Jake's gaze. "Nice suit, city boy," he called out, that smile never wavering. There was something different in his eyes that morning, something I'd never let myself notice before, even though, if I'm being honest with myself, I'd been noticing Jake Morrison since I was 15 years old, and he'd shown up shirtless to help my dad build the new church pavilion. I should have said something clever, something casual. Instead, I just stood there like an idiot, clutching my Bible and my mother's casserole dish, feeling the weight of that whistle settle somewhere deep in my chest. My mother emerged from the church entrance behind me, already chatting with Mrs. Henderson about the wedding, and I watched Jake's expression shift, become carefully neutral, before he tipped his hat and climbed into his truck. That was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks of lying awake at night in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling fan that never quite moved enough air, thinking about that whistle, about the way Jake had looked at me, about all the things I'd spent my whole life trying not to think about. Growing up as the preacher's son in rural Oklahoma meant learning early how to hide, how to make yourself smaller, quieter, safer. It meant never lingering too long when the other boys changed for football practice. It meant dating Jessica Miller for 2 years in high school, even though I felt nothing when I kissed her. It meant choosing a seminary school in Chicago, because it was far enough away that I could finally maybe figure out who I actually was when nobody was watching, except I'd spent that whole first year away feeling like I was wearing someone else's skin. The theology classes felt hollow. The prayers felt like I was speaking a language I'd memorized but never truly understood. And when my roommate Marcus invited me to a pride parade in June, something inside me cracked wide open. I'd stood on that Chicago street surrounded by thousands of people living openly, proudly, and I'd cried. Just stood there and cried like a child because I'd never imagined that kind of freedom was possible. I came home that summer with a secret burning in my chest and no idea what to do with it. My parents thought I was home to help with the church's summer programs. They had no idea their son was falling apart, trying to figure out how to reconcile everything he'd been taught with everything he was finally admitting to himself. And then Jake whistled, and suddenly I couldn't think about anything else. I saw him again at the hardware store on a Wednesday afternoon. I was picking up paint supplies for the church nursery, and he was loading bags of feed onto a flatbed. He was wearing a faded blue t-shirt with the sleeves cut off, and his arms were streaked with dirt and sweat. When our eyes met across the store, something electric passed between us. He nodded toward the back door, then walked out. My hands were shaking as I abandoned my shopping cart and followed. The loading dock was empty except for the 2 of us. Jake leaned against a wooden crate, arms crossed, studying me with an intensity that made my mouth go dry. "You been avoiding me, Daniel?" His voice was low, careful. "No, I couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't lie to him, not with him looking at me like that. "That whistle bothered you?" "Yes." "No, I don't know." I ran a hand through my hair, frustrated with myself. "It surprised me." "Surprised you that I noticed you?" He pushed off from the crate, took a step closer. Or surprised you that you wanted me to. My heart was hammering so hard I was sure he could hear it. Jake, I can't, this isn't... I know who your daddy is, Daniel. I know what you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to want. Another step closer. We were maybe 3 feet apart now, close enough that I could smell the hay and sunshine on his skin. But I also know what I saw in your face when you turned around in that church parking lot. Same thing I've been seeing in my own mirror for the past 5 years. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. What are you saying? I'm saying I've been watching you, Daniel Pritchard, watching you since you came back different, watching you at church trying so hard to be the person everyone expects. And I'm saying that whistle wasn't an accident. I wanted you to know that someone sees you, the real you. The door to the hardware store opened, and we both stepped back instinctively. Old Mr. Patterson shuffled out with a box of nails, nodded at us both, and headed to his car. When he was gone, Jake pulled a piece of paper from his pocket and pressed it into my hand. That's directions to my place, the old barn at the back of our property past the south field. Nobody goes out there anymore. If you want to talk, really talk, meet me there Friday night, 8 o'clock. He paused, his eyes searching mine. No pressure, Daniel, but if you don't show up, I'll understand. I'll never mention this again. We'll just go back to being neighbors who wave at each other from across the street. Then he was gone, and I was standing alone on that loading dock, holding a piece of paper that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I spent the next 2 days in agony. I told myself 100 different reasons why I shouldn't go. It was dangerous, it was wrong. It went against everything I'd been taught, everything my family believed, everything I was supposed to be. But every time I tried to convince myself to throw that paper away, I remembered the way Jake had looked at me, like I was something worth seeing, like I mattered exactly as I was. Friday evening, I told my parents I was going to the late service at the Methodist church in the next town over, checking out their youth program for ideas. My mother kissed my cheek and told me to drive safely. The guilt was crushing, but not as crushing as the thought of spending the rest of my life hiding. The drive to Jake's family farm took 20 minutes. The sun was setting, painting the Oklahoma sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed almost too beautiful, like the world was trying to tell me something. I followed the directions down a dirt road, past fields of wheat that swayed in the evening breeze, until I saw it. An old red barn, weathered and leaning slightly to one side, surrounded by wildflowers. Jake's truck was already there. My hands were shaking as I parked and walked to the barn door. It was open, and inside, someone had strung up old Christmas lights that cast everything in a soft, warm glow. There were hay bales arranged like furniture, an old radio playing quiet country music, and Jake, standing in the middle of it all, looking nervous for the first time since I'd known him. "You came," he said softly. "I almost didn't." "But you did." He smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "That takes courage, Daniel, more than you probably realize." I stepped inside, and he closed the door behind me. The barn smelled like hay and old wood and possibility. We stood there for a long moment, just looking at each other, and I realized this was the first time in my entire life that I'd let myself really, truly look at a man the way I wanted to, without shame, without fear, without immediately forcing my eyes away. "I don't know what I'm doing," I admitted. "I don't know how to do this." "Neither do I," Jake said. "Not really. I've been hiding just as long as you have, maybe longer." He gestured to the hay bales. "Sit with me? Just talk?" We sat, and slowly, carefully, we started sharing our stories. Jake told me about realizing he was different when he was 14, about the terror of growing up on a farm where being gay was something people joked about in the worst ways possible. He told me about a brief relationship with a guy he met at a cattle auction in Tulsa, how they'd meet in motels halfway between their towns, how it had ended when the guy got engaged to a woman he'd been dating as a cover, how Jake had decided after that to just focus on the farm, on being useful, on not wanting anything for himself because wanting felt too dangerous. I told him about Chicago, about the Pride Parade, about sitting in seminary classes and feeling like a fraud, because how could I teach people about God's love when I couldn't even accept it for myself? About Jessica Miller and how I'd broken her heart senior year when I'd ended things without explanation, about lying to my parents every single day just by existing in their house. "Do you still believe?" Jake asked at one point. "In God, I mean." I thought about it, really thought about it. "I don't know. I believe in something. I believe there's love in the world, real love, that's bigger than all the rules and the fear. But the God I was taught about, the one who supposedly made people like us just to condemn us, I can't believe in that anymore. It doesn't make sense." "My mama used to say that God is in the growing things," Jake said quietly. "In the wheat pushing up through the soil, in the calves being born in spring. She said if God is in all that life, all that persistence, then God must be love. Just love. Not all the complications people add to it." He looked at me. "She died when I was 16. Cancer. But I think about that a lot, about how she saw God in simple things, in true things." We talked for hours about our dreams, our fears, our favorite books and movies and songs. Jake told me about wanting to travel someday to see the ocean. I told him about wanting to write, to maybe teach literature instead of theology. We laughed about stupid things, shared memories from growing up in the same small town, discovered we'd both had a crush on the same male teacher in high school, Mr. Davidson, who'd moved away suddenly, and we both now suspected why. At some point, we'd moved closer together on the hay bale, not touching, but close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. The Christmas lights cast shadows across his face, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the kindness in his eyes. "Danielle," he said softly, "can I hold your hand?" It was such a simple question, such a small thing. But tears sprang to my eyes because nobody had ever asked me that before. Nobody had ever wanted to hold my hand just for the comfort and connection of it. "Yes," I whispered. His hand was rough, calloused from years of farm work, and it was the most wonderful thing I'd ever felt. We sat there, hands intertwined, and I felt something inside me settle, like a part of me that had been holding its breath for 22 years could finally exhale. "This is nice," I said. "Yeah," Jake agreed. "It really is." We stayed in that barn until almost midnight, talking and laughing and slowly, carefully, learning how to be ourselves with another person. When it was finally time to go, Jake walked me to my car. We stood there in the moonlight, still holding hands, neither of us wanting to let go. "Can we do this again?" I asked. "Can I come back?" "I was hoping you'd ask that." He squeezed my hand gently. "Same time next week? I'll be here." He leaned in, and for a moment I thought he might kiss me. But instead, he just pressed his forehead to mine. "Drive safe, Daniel. Text me when you get home so I know you made it okay." That became our routine. Every Friday night, I'd make up some excuse and drive out to Jake's barn. We'd talk, share our weeks, slowly peel back the layers of protection we'd both built up over the years. On the third week, he brought his guitar and played for me, old country songs that his grandfather had taught him. His voice was rough but genuine, and I sat there thinking I'd never heard anything more beautiful. On the fourth week, I brought my favorite poetry book, Mary Oliver, and read to him while he leaned against my shoulder. When I got to the line, "You do not have to be good," his hand found mine again, and we both understood what that meant, how revolutionary it felt to hear that we didn't have to earn our right to exist, to love, to be. On the 6th week, Jake finally kissed me. It was gentle, tentative, both of us trembling like teenagers even though we were grown men. When we pulled apart, he was smiling so wide it made my chest ache. "I've wanted to do that since you turned around in that church parking lot," he admitted. "I've wanted you to do that since I was 15 years old and you showed up to build the pavilion," I confessed. He laughed, bright and surprised. "Really? That long?" "That long. I just didn't have words for it then. Didn't let myself understand what I was feeling." We kissed again, longer this time, and it felt like coming home, like every piece of me that had been scattered and hiding, finally coming together in one place. This was what I'd been missing. This connection, this honesty, this feeling of being fully seen and fully accepted. But summer was ending. In 2 weeks, I was supposed to return to Chicago, to seminary school, to the life I'd been building that now felt completely wrong. The thought of leaving Jake, of going back to that loneliness, was unbearable. "Come with me," I said one night, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "To Chicago. Come with me." Jake looked stunned. "Daniel, I can't just leave the farm. My family depends on me." "Your brother's back from the service now. He can help. And you said yourself you've always wanted to see something beyond this town." I grabbed his hands, desperate. We could build a life there, a real life, together. We wouldn't have to hide. "And what about your family, your parents? You'd just leave them without explaining why?" The question hit me like a punch, because he was right. My parents loved me. They'd sacrificed for me, and I'd be abandoning them without giving them a chance to understand, to maybe even accept who I really was. "I don't know how to tell them," I admitted. "I don't know how to break their hearts like that." Jake pulled me close, wrapped his arms around me. "Then maybe you need to figure that out before you make any big decisions, because running away isn't the same as moving forward. I learned that the hard way." He was right. I knew he was right. But the thought of sitting my parents down and telling them the truth was terrifying. My father was a good man, a kind man, but he preached every Sunday about traditional values, about biblical marriage. My mother had already started talking about which girls from church might be good matches for me. How could I destroy their vision of who their son was supposed to be? The next Sunday, I sat in church and actually listened to my father's sermon for the first time in months. He was preaching about the prodigal son, about a father's unconditional love, about welcoming home those who've lost their way, and I realized he had no idea that his own son felt lost, that I had been lost for years, wandering in a wilderness of his expectations and my own fear. After the service, I helped my mother clean up the fellowship hall. We worked in comfortable silence for a while before she spoke. "You've seemed different this summer, Daniel. Happier, somehow. More yourself." She smiled at me. "I'm glad. You seemed so burdened when you first came home." My throat tightened. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." "Do you think God's love is conditional? That there are people God doesn't love?" She stopped wiping down tables and looked at me thoughtfully. "I think God's love is the one thing in this universe that's truly unconditional. It's people who put conditions on it, people who try to limit it to make themselves feel more righteous." She touched my cheek gently. "Why do you ask?" I almost told her then. The words were right there, pushing against my teeth, but my father walked in and the moment passed, and I chickened out. That Friday, I drove to Jake's barn feeling defeated. He took one look at my face and pulled me into his arms. "I can't do it," I said into his shoulder. "I can't tell them." "Then don't. Not yet. Not until you're ready." He pulled back to look at me. "But Daniel, you can't live your whole life for other people's comfort. Eventually, you have to choose yourself. Choose your own happiness." "What if choosing myself means losing everyone I love?" "Then they didn't really love you. They loved the version of you they wanted you to be. That's not the same thing. He cupped my face in his hands. I love you, Daniel, the real you. The you that reads Mary Oliver and cries during sad movies and thinks too much about everything. The you that's scared and brave at the same time. That's who I love. It was the first time either of us had said it. I love you. 3 words that felt like a revolution. I love you too, I whispered. God, Jake, I love you so much. We held each other in that barn, surrounded by hay and Christmas lights and the sound of crickets outside, and I felt something shift inside me, a decision crystallizing. I couldn't keep living in this limbo. I had to make a choice. The next morning, I asked my parents if we could talk. We sat in the living room, the same living room where I'd played with toy cars as a child, where we'd opened Christmas presents and celebrated birthdays and lived an entire life that suddenly felt very far away. I'm not going back to seminary, I said. My voice was shaking, but clear. I'm not going to be a preacher. My father's face fell. Daniel, if this is about doubt, that's normal. Every minister goes through periods of questioning. It's not doubt, Dad, it's certainty. I'm certain this isn't my path. This isn't who I am. Then who are you? My mother asked softly. This was it. The moment everything would change. I thought about Jake, about his courage, about the way he'd looked at me in that barn and said he loved the real me. I thought about the Pride Parade in Chicago, about all those people living openly. I thought about the rest of my life and whether I wanted to spend it hiding. I'm gay, I said. I'm gay, and I've known it for a long time, and I can't pretend anymore. I can't live the life you want for me because it's not my life. It's not who I am. The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. My mother's hand went to her mouth. My father just stared at me, his face unreadable. Is this because of that seminary in Chicago? My father finally asked. Did someone influence you? No, Dad. This is because of me, because I finally stopped lying to myself. I've been gay my whole life. I just didn't have the courage to admit it until now. This is a choice, Daniel, a sinful choice. You can choose differently. It's not a choice, any more than you chose to be straight. This is just who I am. Tears were streaming down my face now, and I need to know if you can love me anyway, if you can love your actual son, not the one you imagined. My mother was crying too. Of course we love you. You're our son. We'll always love you. But do you accept me? Can you accept this part of me? She looked at my father and something passed between them. Years of marriage, of shared faith, of shared assumptions about how the world worked. I don't know, my father said finally, and the honesty of it hurt worse than any condemnation. I don't know how to reconcile this with everything I believe, everything I've taught. Maybe your beliefs need to change, I said. Maybe they're wrong. Or maybe you're confused. Maybe you need counseling, prayer, time to really think about this. I've had 22 years to think about this, Dad. I'm not confused. I'm just finally being honest. We talked for hours. It was painful and messy, and there were no easy answers. My parents didn't reject me, but they didn't embrace this revelation either. They were hurt, confused, convinced this was a phase or a test or something that could be fixed with enough prayer. By the end, we were all exhausted and nothing was resolved. I need some time, my father said. We need to pray about this. Seek guidance. Take all the time you need, I said, but I'm done hiding. I'm done pretending, and there's someone I want you to meet. My mother looked startled. You're seeing someone? Yes, his name is Jake Morrison, and I love him. I could see my father processing this, realizing this wasn't theoretical, this was real. His son was in love with another man, and it wasn't going away. I think you should go, he said quietly. I need time to think, to pray. I stood up, feeling simultaneously lighter and heavier than I'd ever felt. "Okay, I'll be at Jake's if you need me." I drove straight to the farm. Jake was working in the south field, and when he saw me walking toward him, he dropped his tools and ran to meet me. I collapsed into his arms and told him everything. "I'm so proud of you," he said, holding me tight. "God, Daniel, you're so brave." "I don't feel brave. I feel terrified. What if they never accept this? What if I just lost my family?" "Then you gained yourself, and you have me. You'll always have me." We stood there in that wheat field, holding each other while the sun set behind us, and I realized something. I'd spent my whole life thinking freedom was something you found by running away. But real freedom was this: standing in the place that made you with the person you loved and refusing to hide anymore. That was courage. That was grace. The next few weeks were hard. My parents and I barely spoke. The church gossip mill started churning, because in a town this small, secrets don't last long. Some people were kind, some weren't. Mrs. Henderson stopped me outside the grocery store and hugged me, told me she'd always known and loved me anyway. Others crossed the street to avoid me. The youth pastor asked me to stop helping with the summer program, but through it all, Jake was there, steady, strong, loving. He held my hand in public for the first time at the farmer's market, and I saw people stare, but I didn't let go. We were done hiding. My father finally called me 3 weeks after our conversation, asked if I'd come to the house. When I arrived, both my parents were there, and they looked like they'd aged years in those few weeks. "We've been talking to people," my mother said, "other parents who've been through this, reading things, trying to understand." And my heart was pounding. "And we still don't fully understand," my father admitted. "But we love you. We want you in our lives. And if Jake is important to you, then we want to meet him, really meet him." It wasn't complete acceptance. It wasn't them suddenly changing all their beliefs. But it was a start. It was them choosing love over dogma, relationship over righteousness. It was enough. Jake came to dinner the following Sunday. He wore a button-down shirt and brought flowers for my mother and talked about the farm and made my father laugh with a story about a runaway pig. By the end of the night, I could see my parents starting to understand. This wasn't some abstract concept. This was Jake, who they'd known his whole life, who was kind and hardworking and loved their son. This was real. I didn't go back to seminary that fall. Instead, I enrolled in the state university 2 hours away, started studying education. Jake and I got an apartment together in that college town. Small and drafty, but ours. We learned how to build a life together, how to fight and make up, how to cook meals and pay bills and be boring and domestic and wonderfully perfectly ourselves. My parents visited sometimes. It was awkward at first, but slowly, gradually, they started to soften, started to see that our life together wasn't so different from theirs, that love was love, regardless of the gender of the people sharing it. On the anniversary of that first whistle, Jake and I drove back to his family's barn. He'd kept the Christmas lights up, and we sat on those same hay bales holding hands, marveling at how much had changed in 1 year. "Do you regret it?" I asked. "The whistle? Everything that came after?" He pulled me close and kissed me softly. "Not for a single second. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Daniel Pritchard. Even though it's been hard, even though we lost some people along the way, even though. Because we found each other, we found ourselves. That's worth everything." He was right. It had been worth it. Every difficult conversation, every loss, every moment of fear, because I was finally living my truth, finally loving openly, finally free. Sometimes I think about that morning in the church parking lot, about how one whistle changed everything. But the truth is, Jake didn't change me. He just saw me, really saw me, and gave me the courage to see myself, to accept myself, to love myself enough to demand that the world accept me too. We're still here, still in Oklahoma, though we've talked about moving somewhere bigger, somewhere with more people like us. But this is home. This is where our story started, and we're not hiding anymore. We hold hands at the farmer's market. We dance together at weddings. We exist, openly and proudly. And every day that we do, we make space for someone else to do the same. My father preached a sermon last month about love, about how God's love is bigger than our understanding, about how maybe our job isn't to judge who deserves love, but to love as widely and openly as we can. After the service, he hugged me and whispered, "I'm trying, son. I'm really trying. That's all any of us can do. Try. Keep our hearts open. Keep choosing love over fear. Keep being brave enough to be ourselves, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Jake still whistles sometimes. When I'm getting dressed for work, when I'm cooking dinner, when I'm just existing in our shared space. And every time I turn around and smile at him, grateful for that first whistle, for his courage, for the life we've built together. Because that whistle wasn't just appreciation, it was recognition. It was one person seeing another and saying, "I see you, I know you, you're not alone." And sometimes that's all we need, to be seen, to be known, to know we're not alone in our truth. So if you're out there, hiding, scared, thinking you're the only one, I want you to know you're not. There are so many of us, living and loving and building lives that look nothing like what we were told they should look like. And those lives are beautiful, messy and complicated, and sometimes painful, but beautiful. Your whistle is coming. Your person who sees you is out there. And when you find them, or they find you, I hope you're brave enough to turn around. Brave enough to be seen. Brave enough to build something real and true and yours. Because you deserve that. We all deserve that. To be loved for exactly who we are.